Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio with contributions by Elvin Freites is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business that we've continued to do on and on again to the tune of 520 plus episodes. As you know, as we record this episode, we are literally like 9 stinking days away from releasing our book that's been a year plus in the making. It's called Commencement, the beginning of an era, new era in higher education. You can get it for pre-order on Amazon. I've got like book plates I've got to sign here because the orders are overwhelming. There's been 2 orders, my wife and my mom so far. But that's a good place to start. I feel like, and I ordered one for myself. So that's 3. Kate ordered 1, that's 4. And Elvin ordered 1, that's 5. So we're at 5 orders so far. No, actually it's 10 because we all ordered the Kindle and the soft copy version. So see, it got to double figures really fast. Anyway, we'd really appreciate it if you give it a thought to order, whether you order pre-order or you buy it when the book comes out. We think you're going to find it very interesting. It is pretty awesome to see what all of these presidents think about what the future of higher education holds. I've got a first-time guest and a first-time guest co-host today, which of course is my favorite combination because it usually ends up in some type of a train wreck because the guest co-host doesn't know what they're doing. The guest and the guest co-host, they all mess up together, and I sit back and look like the one that knows what I'm doing. So these work out pretty good for me here. I'm going to bring them in one at a time, ladies and gentlemen. First, my guest co-host, and I've been waiting. I promise you, I've been waiting for this moment, ladies and gentlemen. I've been able to bring my colleague here at Lindenwood University out from the shadows into the light. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's Rob Westervelt. He's the VP of Strategy and Innovation at Lindenwood University. Rob, it's about damn time, my friend.
Well, thank you, Joe. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. If you do mess up, I can promise you your colleagues here at Lindenwood will hold you to all of the heckling that comes with the job here. So no pressure.
Oh, did they listen to this? I didn't know.
let me just get this warmed up for you, buddy. Oh boy, well done, Rob. Well done. Let's not forget whose podcast this is and all the sound effects I have to embarrass you along the way. Anyway, we have a great guest today. There is so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's Dr. Mike Barger, Assistant Clinical Professor of Business Administration at the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Mike, how are you?
I'm great, Joe. Thanks for inviting me. It's an honor, a privilege, and hopefully we can give your folks a few things to think about today.
One of the things we'll first think about is how many points the University of Michigan will beat the Ohio State University by when they play here shortly. I would like a blowout win in the favor of University of Michigan.
I would like that as well.
Okay.
I vote for that.
Predict the score? You don't want to jinx it?
Let's see. I'm going to go 31-21 Michigan.
Nothing against all the Ohio State fans out there, but boy, that would be great.
Yes, it would.
Anyway, Mike, thanks for coming. By the way, thank you for your service to the United States of America.
My pleasure.
Many wouldn't know. They look at your background. It reads like it's almost fake. That how could one person possibly do these things together all at once? A Top Gun instructor for the U.S. Navy and one of the founding members of JetBlue Airways. Mike, how do you do all of this?
Attention, Captain speaking.
See, I got that for you. Go ahead.
How
do you do all this?
Being in the right place at the right time, I think. I have been really in education my whole professional life, and these were just logical steps on the path. And to my statement about being in the right place at the right time, that does seem to be what the working world is all about these days. So had some good connections and some folks that were trying to do interesting things at interesting times and took advantage of the opportunity.
Amazing.
I love that. That one of the things that I found most interesting was while you were at JetBlue, you started a doctoral degree in workplace learning leadership. I love it, right? Because this is what the conversation is about now. Workplace learning and not theory and practice. And, what was that degree all about? Why did you start it? And how have those concepts stayed with you through
Yeah.
your time at University of Michigan?
Good question. So that started because when I was running the corporate university at JetBlue, I had a pretty good background in pilot education from my time as a flight instructor in the Navy and running the Top Gun school, but I didn't really know how to prepare corporate educators to be good at their jobs. So I reached out to universities in New York City, so NYU and Columbia, and I was looking for a credit-bearing program for my faculty at JetBlue University, and ended up doing a program at NYU. It was it was a 75-hour program. It carried about a dozen transferable credits, and all of my faculty who started as great doers and tried to turn into great educators were prepared to go be effective in their jobs at JetBlue. So that was kind of a cool start. Well, anyway, the gentleman who was my point of contact at NYU, right about the time the program was starting, took a job down a leadership role at the School of Education at Penn. And after he had been down there for a couple of weeks, he sent me a note and said, "Hey, I just met with the provost, and the provost said, 'What's the big opportunity that we're missing here?'" And Doug, his name, Doug Lynch, and I had been talking about the fact that there is no developmental program for workplace learning leaders. We come from all over the place. We're training people, we're ops people, we're finance, HR people, and there's really no program to develop us. And so we went from idea. So I went down to Penn, talked to some folks there. We went from idea to a fully accredited master's to doctoral program in about 18 months. We've put over 150 people through the program now. It's a 3-year doctoral program, some really amazing work being done in kind of the education leadership space, kind of outside of traditional academia. And I'm super proud of it. And I had an extra free 90 seconds a week that I could put into the program and made every other one of those seconds count.
Wow.
Before I pass it to you, Rob, 18 months is, depending on who you're talking to, 18 months can be very fast in higher ed. It can, to some people, it's long, but I mean, when you're starting the program from scratch and recruiting for it and selling it, what was it like to get into higher ed? So you're JetBlue University, you're in the corporate world, you're a business guy. Okay, you're going to come into higher ed, heavily regulated, slow as molasses. How do you bridge? Because that's still one of the biggest, I don't know, it exists still. And we talk about speed, and then you get into higher ed sometimes and you go, oh gosh, how do you work through that?
Well, I was a flight instructor before I came to college. I was then a flight instructor in the military. So I learned military, education and training. Then I went to JetBlue and started the corporate universe there. So knew about kind of private or public sector education. I left JetBlue and went and started an ed tech company in Philadelphia and helped that grow, and exited that business. And so I'd seen education from pretty much all the different aspects that you can see it from. And so I always wanted to come back and teach, right off into the sunset as a crotchety old instructor. And so I'm back where I wanted to be. It is a fascinating community. I have a great appreciation now for kind of what its responsibilities are. I also, as a business guy and an entrepreneur, am quite frequently frustrated to some extent on how slow things do actually move. Generally, it probably needs to move a little more slowly than I would like it to, but rolling out of the pandemic here, we can talk a little bit later on about how I am hopeful that we can embrace some of the lessons we've learned, through the pandemic.
Somebody that likes to move slowly, my co-host, Rob Westervelt. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. I've got a question, kind of pivoting a little bit to access. You've talked about some elite. I mean, you've been involved in a lot of elite institutions, but I'm kind of going back to your JetBlue time here, and the founder, David Neeleman, and kind of his background with ADHD. Wasn't a great student. He said he didn't read a book in high school. But what about those individuals and getting access to higher education when they don't conform to the sort of traditional specs of a successful student? Have you changed any of your views on that now that you've been in higher ed for quite a while?
Well, I would say two comments on that. One, the philosophy we embraced at JetBlue is that we all felt like people learn better by doing. So we were big believers in experiential learning. We designed and built new types of simulators for different crew members to be able to learn and, make mistakes, fail, learn from those failures and improve. A lot of that we did at JetBlue, and we could talk all day about what I believe are the just critical benefits of immersive experiential learning. I just think that that's vitally important. What I learned in my time at CorpU, the ed tech company that I was with, was that there are some really nice benefits of putting together a thoughtful online program that gives learners of all types kind of the time and space they need to make sense of the material, which I think we all know from having sat in classrooms most of our lives. That's a really tough environment to absorb what you need to absorb. And, reading through your notes after class is helpful, but not necessarily the answer there. So having a mechanism to, provide the readings and videos and collaboration forums for people to kind of find the time and space they need to learn things is just really important and something I'm excited about.
Nailed it.
Nice. So when you're talking about like the EDD program that you did at Penn and some of these other issues of like, how do you pull somebody out from this big group of folks, whereas maybe they don't have the opportunity to do this sort of experiential learning prior to getting to, let's say, a higher level doctoral program or a master's program. Maybe their transcripts aren't showing it. What are some things do you think that universities should be looking at that would suggest this is a person who's ready to go to the next level? Maybe their college transcript from 25 years ago doesn't show it, but we have other indicators. Have you thought more about that?
Sure. I think we're going to see lots of evolution in the credentialing space. I think employers are trying to figure out ways to not only manage performance more effectively, but to sift through their collection of talent to find those people that are great fits for promotions or other jobs within the organization. We're seeing in the kind of the ed tech space, we're seeing the rise of companies that want to provide services in this kind of credential management space. I think we'll see some blockchain advances in credential management. Even today, LinkedIn is certainly not the authority on validating transcripts and resumes and degrees and those kind of things. So I think both as a positive next step and as a little bit of a kind of a preventive filtering kind of step, I think we're going to see some advances in technology that allow people to actually take some credit for lived experience, which will be really exciting.
That's a great segue into what I think is one of the most important questions that we have in higher ed today, which is this question of value, right? Because the credentialing space, for better or for worse, I don't think it's decreased the perceived value of a college degree, but it certainly has provided alternative pathways. We had a gentleman named Scott Cheney on a couple of weeks ago. He's the CEO of Credential Engine, and they collate and basically catalog all of different credentials out there, from one that's offered at UPenn to I always say my brother's son's father, Ricky, who does real estate on the side and wants you to take his class about how to become a better real estate agent. There's something like almost 1 million different credentials. One confusing part of credentials is that there is no system around it. And we understand systems as human beings. That's why higher ed, at least the degree system itself, is pretty easy to understand. You get a bachelor's, you get a master's in the US, and you can understand how that goes. But then value comes in. You're a business guy. You've been in business for a long time. Is the degree losing its relevance? Is it higher ed that needs to better communicate its value? Where do you see this whole conversation around credentialing and value?
I don't know if the degree is losing its value. I think the top tier universities have a little more runway to kind of run on, I believe, just because of their history and tradition.
By the way, you did say runway as a Top Gun instructor.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, or flight deck, I guess, if we want to talk about the carrier. I do think that I know we are starting to see companies, especially in the tech space. So think, the Googles and Microsofts and Amazons and others are taking a real hard look at how much value a degree at even a place like Michigan might provide. Would it be worth their time is the question they're asking to maybe allow their new hires a chance to finish maybe half of a degree here and then take care of the rest themselves, whether it's material that they create or it's a collaborative material that they partner with a university or multiple universities to kind of manage some of that opportunity cost. So, Amazon specifically has come to us and said, hey, we're not so sure we shouldn't just build our own university, right? And hire undergrads from wherever we want them and just teach them what we need them to know.
Do you think they'll do it? I mean, they invested like $77 million or $1 billion.
Yeah, they are doing it right now.
Yeah, they're going to do it. Will it work? So the interesting thing is similar to any kind of corporate university team is where do you find the relevant expertise to teach, right? So we're in this interesting challenge of, faculty, especially research faculty that are deep experts in their narrow, vertical. And so you've got some great research expertise coming from university researchers. You don't see that really in the corporate world, right? So there's practical expertise. This is how we do things around here kind of expertise. But there's got to be an intersection somewhere where kind of the university system, the traditional higher ed system is able to provide some of that expertise that isn't available in the corporate environment. So even an Amazon or a Google, obviously super smart organizations, where are they going to find some of the deep expertise that we have in the academic space? So I see a partnership evolving out of this. I just don't know what they're going to look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. Rob, back to you in a sec, but I got to ask about curriculum relevance, right? I feel you've been in at the highest levels of business and industry. You come to higher education. How do you keep your curriculum relevant? How do you make sure that you're not missing business concepts? Because I feel at times, and this might just be me, I don't think it is, but the higher ed space can lull you to sleep and make you forget about the innovations out there sometimes if you're not bringing in people who are experts to tell you what's up. So how do you stay relevant now that you're not at the front end of all of that?
Yeah, well, I certainly think from a business faculty member perspective, the business faculty here are out in the field constantly doing research. I think the benefit that a faculty member here offers those Amazon folks we were just talking about is they are looking at multiple sectors in their particular area of expertise. So what they bring to the party is, here is what we are seeing many companies do. The Amazon side, we keep coming back to this Amazon example just to make it easy to follow, is, well, we're really interested in what works for Amazon. Well, that's great until it's time for Amazon to innovate, or it's time for people to change jobs or change careers or change companies, and they will have a very Amazon slanted approach to what they learned and how they see the world. So again, I think we need to be really careful about how narrow our focus is, and I think that's where the high-end university researchers are really doing a great job of making sure people understand. This is what's going on more kind of horizontally, broadly. Now use that and figure out how it applies in your world.
Rob, I would kick it over to you, but my questions are so amazing. I can certainly keep going.
Well, maybe you'll enjoy this, Joe. So you had mentioned blockchain earlier, And I'm curious to know what level of disruption you believe there's going to be with that, and kind of to maybe throw you a scenario. This sort of idea that higher education tends to replicate itself throughout the entire sector. So somebody comes up with an innovation, everybody copies it. There's a positive aspect to that. Then the negative aspect is all the gaps that exist in higher education also get replicated. And then employers have a hard time telling the difference between a straight A student at this school in this major and a straight A student at this school in this major. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, when you mention blockchain, do you envision in the near future where employers are going to just be saying, open up your blockchain to me and let me see who you took these courses with, or what types of experiences at which companies, maybe credentials or what have you have in your blockchain? Because if you, let's say a student took Professor A, who was a professor everybody took to get through this course, and another student took Professor B, who was a legit expert, and all things being equal, might they choose the other?
I think there were a few questions in there.
Yeah, there was a lot in there, but the overall question is, where do you see where do you see blockchain going in terms of how it changes the nature of education?
Well, I do believe that there will be an effort to capture all of a student's kind of experiences and performance across all of the things that they do. So, we on the podcast today know that, that university education is a lot more than just what happens in the classroom, right? There's the clubs and athletics and extracurriculars and co-curriculars. There's all kinds of things. So, it's hard to capture today, student Joe, who not only, did all of the core, curriculum and then some safe, common electives, but, Joe that might do, an abroad project, or he might do certain challenging experiential, programs, or he might be part of an athletic, program or a club sport, or, those kind of things. They appear on people's resumes, but to your point, Rob, it's really hard to compare the apples to apples. And so I do think we're moving to a place where all of those experiences there's a mechanism to kind of capture not just what they did, but how they did and what they learned and how that translates into a skill or a capability. I think we're heading that way. It's going to be super complicated, but I think we're heading that way.
And do you think that students might at some point say, I don't want that professor in my blockchain?
I think there will be some choices that we'll have to make on design of these things. I do like to believe that the market generally finds a closer version of the truth, meaning that if Rob's a spectacular, marketing 101 faculty member and Mike is a kind of a crotchety, different grade distribution, nobody really likes him, but it was the only section I could get in, is that eventually the market kind of discovers that, right? And so maybe there is an additional layer in the blockchain that says, now let me tell you about where Joe develop those skills. Did he develop them for Rob or from Mike? And so there's a coefficient or a variable or something that goes into the formula.
Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freites, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.
If I said, Dr. Mike Barger, I'd like you in my blockchain, does that make you excited or offend you? That's the question we'll have to ask Rob as a consequence of what you're talking about.
Totally.
Go, buddy. You're asking good questions.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I think this fits nicely in the category of both something that sounds cool and modern and that we should be experimenting with, and at the same time, it solves a real problem. I'm not going to quote the statistic I heard, because I can't remember it and I don't know that it was true, but it was a significant percentage of like LinkedIn claims for credentials that are not true. It's a really big number.
Yeah, well, and there's actually analog to this in the real world with musicians, because musicians are known by who they actually were taught by or performed with. And it's just different because they have to actually be able to perform at a certain level in their particular skills. So, and then one last question before I pass it back to Joe. Do you envision that college degrees will expire in the future and have to be updated like computer software, and that universities will start sending out the 2.0 update? And an example might be like computer science, that they're going to say you have to have a degree that is relevant up to this date to apply for this job.
Well, I think the experts in the HR data space, the Gallups and Deloittes and those kinds of firms, are now saying that the half-life of a skill is 5 years, right? So it's hard for me to imagine where the same notion, doesn't apply to degrees. I think it raises the question, Rob, of how do employers actually kind of assess the degree? Do they use it as just a filtering mechanism? If they were good enough to get into Michigan, then they're probably, good enough to interview or get into our pipeline somewhere. A quick anecdote here that you'll find interesting. This is not unique to Michigan Ross, but a couple of years ago, one of the biggest challenges we had here with our undergrads at the business school. So there aren't a ton of undergraduate business programs, although that the number is growing, is that we started to feel pressure from the banks and the investment banks to have access to our finance undergrads early in their time here. And in fact, the challenge we had was they wanted access to our undergrad business students about a month and a half into their freshman year.
Interesting.
To do an interview with them, a simple interview to screen them for internships 18 months later, to then decide if after the internship they wanted to offer them a job. So this is you're 6 weeks into your freshman year at the University of Michigan, and an investment bank wants to interview you for a job 3.5 years from now.
That is so interesting, because it reminds me, I asked somebody the other day a question along the lines of, is it better to get admitted into Harvard or to graduate from Harvard? You look at all the people who have been super successful who dropped out their freshman year. And kind of to your point, is it just a filter to say, hey, I'm good enough to get admitted to this school, and now that I've proven that, do I actually need to follow through?
Yeah, well, I think the story that I just told you is kind of evidence of, yes, of course, it's important that they do really well in their academics and that they graduate and complete all. And in fact, all of the offer letters, have that little statement there, the needs of the Navy. Yes, you have to finish the program. You have to do well, right? All those things. But their behavior certainly points toward the idea that, we're really struggling with just filtering, and this is a very easy, logical filter to overlay on top of the talent base. So if you got into Michigan, we know it's competitive, especially in that area, we're interested in talking to you. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know how, I've got quite a few kids, and I can't imagine me or them 6 weeks into their freshman year saying, let me sit down with an investment bank and tell them why I'll be a great investment banker.
No, sir.
What do we think about the supply and demand issues of higher education right now? There's a lot of institutions out there. There's declining demographics, and it's highly competitive. There's your super brands. You'd put University of Michigan in there, right? Everybody that knows University of Michigan. Yeah. There's a lot, way more mid-sized to smaller 4-year privates, or 2 years, that are really in trouble. Whether it's through recruiting, or it's marketing, it's retention. So you come back to supply and demand. When there's less demand and we have overwhelming supply, what happens? And so we're starting to see some mergers and acquisitions in the space. What's your take on what's happening out there, and how long you think the what do we call it, like the M&A phase of higher ed might last? And do you see as many institutions out there in the long term, or you think it's going to slim down?
Well, I think we could dust off, Michael Porter's good old handy 5 forces, right? And talk our way through what's going on in higher ed. And, there are a ton of alternatives. That is a challenge. When you talk about, students thinking about, their choices to go to university or go to school, the collection of alternatives is not just this school or that school anymore, right? Now they could say, well, I want to go to Amazon, or I want to go to Delta Airlines, or I want to go to, any company that has said, come here, get started early, and we'll figure out a way to get you educated. And a lot of these companies are also attaching kind of a seniority date to that, point of entry. And so it's a pretty compelling argument to, come out of a good high school or do really well on test scores and have someone float you a job offer that says included in this is an opportunity to achieve some credentials that will be meaningful in the marketplace, for a long time. So I think the big challenge, Joe, long road to a small house, maybe there, but I think the challenge is that it's not just this school or that school, and it's not a matter of the big block M competing with the big block O. Not that that would be a choice; that'd be an easy one. But I think it's I don't know. Do I want to get my degree from Coursera? Do I want to go to Google University and get my degree there? Do I want to? I say all the time, I got my MBA starting JetBlue because I've got my postgrad degree in education. But I'm here teaching MBA students entrepreneurship and leadership skills that I developed, through my professional career. So I'm probably a good poster child for how would we capture life experiences that are worth valuing.
One of the things, Rob, before I kick it back to you, I think about this a lot because I talk to leaders all over the world, running institutions, folks like yourself, Mike, business and industry professionals. And we get into this conversation about alternative pathways all the time. Yeah. You could just go here, you could go there, you could do this, do that. And I wonder what that conversation sounds like from a parent to kid perspective. I get it from the adult. You're an adult, maybe you're switching careers and you go, I'm not going to go do 4 years and get an undergrad degree. I'm going to go over here and get this skill and get a job over here.
Yeah.
But we've had undergraduate education for so long, and parents say, hey, look, you're going to go to college and I'm going to pay. Can you imagine hey, look, you're not going to go to college. It would be just so much better if you just skip college and you go into the workforce, because that's going to give you a better ROI or whatever I'm going to say as a parent. And I just imagine how that conversation is happening, because I hear people saying it. The college doesn't have value, or there's alternative pathways. We're saying it now too. But how does just the reality and the expectation in my mind never connects? Like, I can't imagine it. And I'm at the front end of all this stuff with educators every day.
Yeah.
I talk to people that are doing innovative stuff, and then I go home and go, could I look my kids in the eye and go, you know what? I'm not going to push you forward into that college education. I want you to explore other things. Have you ever thought about that? Or is this just me out in outer space? Because I just wonder how that conversation takes place. I know I'm in outer space all the time.
Yes, I was going to say, I think that the odds of that are probably good. I think that, so the hard data still tell us that the earnings potential and lifetime earnings of someone that gets a 4 degree as opposed to people that don't is significantly higher, right? So the data still support the argument. I certainly think as well, beyond just the academic components of being in a structured environment that has, mechanism for, whole student health and support and those kinds of things. I think there is a lot of learning that takes place outside of the classroom. It is hard to duplicate in the kind of the corporate environment. So, Amazon University sounds cool and fascinating, but you're also working and dealing with all the challenges of work in the VUCA kind of environment. So it'll be a while before we know whether that actually allows these people to grow and develop. We're also seeing data that tell us that the average tenure in a job now and for the foreseeable future is less than 5 years. It's 4 to 4.5 years. And so, so while my dad had one job, maybe our dads had like one job, right? I'm in career number 4 now. And what we're telling students here at Michigan is that you are going to have 8, 10, 12 careers in your life, many of which won't be related to the other ones. And so how do you prepare for that kind of a career trajectory? And for that, I would argue that the life skills you need to learn in college are probably not so much finance and basic marketing and basic strategy, but dealing with complexity and ambiguity and those
Critical
kinds
thinking,
of things. Yeah.
It is fast. Rob, back over to you.
Yeah. So given that, what would you say are the jobs to be done for colleges in the next 5 to 10 years that need to be addressed?
I think let's see, how do I not get in trouble here? I do think that
for other schools, not for yours.
Well, I think all of us, we spend a lot of time with core curricula at every school. Every degree program, has a set of core courses that you just have to, be experienced, you get exposed to. I do wonder how important it is that you get exposure to those here or everywhere. I wonder if Rob Westervelt had created the best ever marketing 101 course, and he put it into an online platform, and it is just it's 5 stars across the board. Everyone that takes it says it's life-changing. It's the best thing that's ever been done. I wonder then why the market doesn't leverage that. Why does every university need a marketing 101 that's a little bit different? And I understand there are some dynamics at play that kind of require that, but I am thinking that with the migration of learning to kind of as needed platforms, the crash courses of the world that have 12.5 million, viewers now. And I ask my students, how many of you have been to crash course? And all of them, graduate students, undergrad students, will raise their hand and say, of course I've been there. When I ask them, if you remember the Challenger accident, nobody raises their hand anymore. So obviously things are kind of moving along. But I do wonder if there is a migration toward, let's knock out these blocking and tackling basics between high school and when I go to university, so that I don't have to spend time, in the core, kind of the more black and white, it's just kind of been done this way forever. So you need to understand, accounting principles and GAAP and, the 4 Ps of marketing and right. It just kind of seems like an interesting question.
Yeah. This idea of the core, you hear this all the time, is there's a constant redoing of the core of general education. And, I always thought of general education as being what you get through K through 12 as your general education. But, this concept of the liberal arts seems to be fairly ambiguous, but you're kind of alluding to this idea of what must I know to be, if we were to define it in the very traditional sense, to make one more free in the world today. What are the kinds of courses you think that freshmen, underclassmen should take that would make them more free in the world today that are typically not being taught at that level?
At what level, Rob?
At that sort of general core level. So I'm talking about general education, which is a requirement by every, for your institution. What are the courses that aren't being taught? Because we hear a lot from employers that there's these gaps that all students should know the following things, but don't.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all seen, any course that helps students kind of develop some mental models for dealing with uncertainty or ambiguity. That is kind of where certainly a lot of business schools are migrating to those kinds of experiences where it's just not rote memorization and kind of repeat back the formula, because we all know now the formulas are going to be available, typing in a few words in Google, you get the formula. It's trying to understand the scenarios where certain formulas apply and how do I deal with team member conflict on teams? How do I deal with lack of clarity around the problem we're trying to solve, or what success looks like? How do I deal with conflict? Those kinds of things, I think, are skills that will matter in a world where the half-life of a skill is less than 5 years and a tenure in a job is 4. Right. I think you need those. I would think you need those kind of universally applicable. Hey, I'm going to have to work with people. I'm going to have to work in an uncertain world, whatever sector I'm in. We need to be able to deal with these kinds of things. That's what I'd like to see more of. And going back to the earlier, hey, if we all used Rob's Marketing 101 course, does that mean you can make the university experience shorter? Right. Give people advanced credit and let them place out. I don't believe that that's the answer necessarily. That may help us deal with some of the cost of education challenges. Maybe that helps us deal with the opportunity cost challenges. But I would like to see, as an interim fix, leaning more on these online programs, which are great for the basics, and then replacing the classroom versions of those courses with something more immersive and action-based and experiential, right? So, hey, you've learned the marketing equations from your online program. Let's dive into some real projects from real businesses and let you kind of work through the mess a little bit and see if you can make sense of it. That to me is a more valuable experience at university. And Joe, back to your question about the future of universities, if I were a parent or a student and was looking at what kind of experience I want in school, there's something about learning by doing that seems to resonate with people. If that simulates the world that I'm going to have to go operate in, and I can do that in a safe environment where there's support, let me try that. I want to do that.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I was interviewing a long time ago, Bernie Weiss. He's the president of iHeartMedia New York. And he said, how come I can't get somebody with a degree in sales? He's like, I want them to know how to sell because they're going to sell themselves or something for the rest of their lives. But we don't have any higher education institutions that teach sales. You teach psychology or marketing, but no one sits you down and says, here's how you sell. But we do, right? This is really fascinating. I've got to close this episode or we could keep you here all day, Mike. And I know you don't want to be here with me, you would stay, but with Rob, I'm sure you want to get going. What didn't we say about the Stephen M. Ross School of Business that you would like to say? Anything you have coming up, announcements, anything just about the school itself at the University of Michigan that you would like to say to the audience? And then secondarily to that, what do you see as the future of higher ed?
So here at Ross, we just believe in experiential learning. We're committed to it. We try to provide students at all levels opportunities to actually learn by doing. I'll speak on behalf of the business school, but learning business while doing business is about as good as it gets. So it's a pretty impressive portfolio of different experiential learning opportunities. I think higher ed has a little bit of an identity challenge ahead of us. I think there is a real need for particularly research institutions that try to move closer to the truth than what we might see online. Rob, I almost said a little earlier about what courses do we need that we don't seem to be providing, and that's this. Can't we sift through the noise and kind of find, reality a little closer to what the data tell us the reality is? I don't know. It's been a really challenging last, 5+ years or so, just watching the world spin, and with frequent apparent disregard for just the facts. I don't know. Whatever. My wife teaches here at our School of Education. So so the Barger family sits in front of the TV and just my side to side head muscles work really well now because just lots of shaking my head side to side. So I think Joe, I think there is a bit of an identity challenge ahead of us. I think that as much as universities really love to teach, marketing and strategy and understanding the market and responding to the needs of your customers and those kinds of things, there's not as much evidence that we actually, follow our own teaching all the time. So I do think the market is going to tell us that they're ready to see some things done differently. I think that we need to look back over these last 2.5 years and forget the kind of the pain and suffering and how hard it was for us to jump through hoops to make things happen. In the midst of all of that, there were lots of shiny, bright lights of cool innovation. And I actually made this work. I didn't think I could make it work, but not only did I make it work, but feedback from students is some of the best that I've ever gotten. And so that drawing us toward a brighter future and the tension of, boy, it was just so much easier 3 years ago and we just kind of did things the way we were used to doing. So there's some tension there that I think is going to define the identity of different universities over these next few years.
So they say the 7 worst words in business or anywhere else is we've always done it that way, I think, right? We've always done it that way. Anyway, it could be 6, 7, depending on how you look at it. One person here, I will say that did marginally well today, surprisingly, was my guest co-host, ladies and gentlemen, Rob Westervelt. He's VP of Strategy and Innovation at Lindenwood University. Rob, I mean that you did well, my friend. Nice job.
You sound so surprised, Joe.
Well,
my feelings are hurt.
I don't want you to get a big head and then you're going to end up in my office all the time trying to get on the podcast. I got to keep you at a relatively low level.
It was easy. We had a good guess. Mike made it easy.
We had an incredible guest, ladies and gentlemen. He was your guest today. Here he is. He's Dr. Mike Barger. He's Assistant Clinical Professor of Business Administration at the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Mike, did you have a good EdUp experience here on the podcast today?
That was great. It was nice to meet Rob.
Very good to meet you, Mike.
Where's my... Oh, boy, you two. We're going to have you both back. Mike, you know what? You're so good. I got to tell you, what I love to do is have my guests come back and co-host with me. So open invitation to you. Anytime you want to come back, we'll interview a president or two, and we'll give them the business on the other side of the microphone.
That'd be great. Time. Would love to.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Commencement. The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio with contributions by Elvin Freites is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.